that it has enhanced the value of insurance in estate planning. And I'll tell you why. And that is because largely the fact that it's now only 6% means that there is no other option remaining for the client than to pass on their wealth after death. And if it is passed on after death, it means they only need to set aside a portion of their income or a portion of their assets for the payment of taxes, isn't it? But I'm jumping the gun. Let me now go through the process. Things have changed over the last years that I've been making this presentation, particularly because of trade. But let me now begin with a discussion. First, with something that all of us already know, and I'll be very quick here. The hierarchy of financial needs, which basically says the most basic of all these needs is the need for financial protection. Wow. Anything that will ensure that the family will be taken care of regardless of the circumstances. And then as we began working, we learned to set aside a portion of our income in order to finance a future project. Buying a car, building a house, getting married, or funding the education of our children, and we call that savings. And as we progress in our careers, in our profession, our savings grew and they became funds, and we looked for various instruments to place these funds in. Some are conservative, and so they'd rather put their money in real properties or in fixed income funds. Some are aggressive, they put their money in business or in stocks. Yet some, like doctors and other professionals who do not have time for this, would rely on people like you to help them decide where to put the money. All of this play into what we call as investment. The matter of enhancing what we already have by the use of the right and proper instruments. And finally, we reach a stage in life when we find ourselves blessed with so much, a beautiful home, a prospering business, funds here and there, and all of this we consider and we call as wealth. And as we look back, we see our children enjoying the comforts of life and the blessings of wealth, and we're thankful to the Lord. But as we look forward, we know deep in our hearts that there on the horizon is an invisible finish line. A line that is drawing nearer and nearer at each passing day, a line that we shall all cross in one of these days. And when we do cross that line, we will be leaving behind two treasures that we hold dear in our hearts: our family and our wealth. And here's the concern. Here's the concern of your clients. They'd like to make sure that even as their children today are enjoying the comforts of life and the blessings of wealth, that they would continue, they and their children's children would continue to benefit and enjoy this wealth beyond the finish line, beyond the lifetime. And so they sit down and start the process called estate planning. The first two have to do with being financially well. You have a savings and a protection plan, you are financially well. I'd like to think that most of you are covered here, otherwise it's a cardinal sin for a financial advisor not to be financially well.
Yeah.
And the next two have to do with the concept of wealth management. The matter of enhancing what we already have by the use of the right and proper instruments, and the matter of eventually passing on what we have to the next generation, hopefully as a blessing. And we will try, as we discuss this, we will be focusing on estate planning, particularly in one area of estate planning, which is estate taxation under training. You know that this is a 4-hour session. When I do this before clients, this is 4 hours. Now I'm confined only to 15 minutes now. Because I was supposed to be here at 2 o'clock. All right? So now we'll be confining this about an hour. So let me begin with how I usually begin, and that is to set the stage by talking about a fundamental principle of ownership. And I firmly believe in this, that God is the owner of everything. From the heavens to the earth, gold and silver, He is the owner, we are the managers. Ownership, stewardship, two different matters. And why is this important? Because when we confuse our roles and we begin to think of ourselves as the owners and not merely managers, we begin to hold a tight grip on wealth. Wealth in turn will begin to hold a tight grip on our hearts. It will cloud our minds. We make many wrong decisions. In a regular 4-hour session, I usually talk about this wrong decisions made oftentimes by estate owners. And I always say that these wrong decisions are rooted in the wrong appreciation of who the real owner is. God is the owner. We're but the managers. There's a far greater reason why God has chosen some people to hold the wealth that they have today. The what, why, and when of estate planning in brief. The definition: it is the detailed and systematic study of the personal and financial affairs of a person to help him adapt and carry out the plan for the disposition of his properties and earnings
Sa kanya
that
galing.
can give him, referring to the
Ikaw
estate
nagbigay.
owner, and his family, referring to his children, his future heirs, maximum benefit and satisfaction. One of the many definitions of estate planning, you can read that in books, particularly my book. It's right there. Now, if you will, I have my own personal definition. It goes this way. It is the effective utilization, conservation, and timely distribution of God's resources entrusted to a person to enable him, his family, and communities to enjoy the blessings of wealth during and after his lifetime, all in accordance with God's will.
Thank you.
I invite you to consider the following in the light of these two definitions. Number one, that wealth is not only a blessing to you,
Complete
more
service. Thank
importantly, it
you.
is intended to make us a channel of blessings, not only to our family, but even to our community, to our country, to the church, to the least of our brethren. That's a far greater reason why people have been given wealth. And I believe that it is to make them a channel of God's love and mercy. And I find so much satisfaction out of that. Number two, the conservation is not only about keeping your wealth intact. More importantly, it is about keeping the family whole. Understand this. Many times families enter into all kinds of schemes trying to conserve their wealth for the benefit of their children, not realizing in so doing they have effectively pushed their children into conflict situations. They end up fighting and quarreling over wealth. For what profit the heirs if they gain the whole estate but lose their peace in the process? Is it worth it? I submit that the greater purpose of estate planning is precisely to keep the peace and harmony in the family, even as we pass on wealth to them. Number three, estate planning is not only about tax avoidance. Sure, that's one of the objectives, but not the only objective. Because a greater objective of estate planning is conflict avoidance, particularly court avoidance. Do anything and everything to avoid the court in the settlement of the estate, because that will not only erode the very inheritance, it will also erode the relationships within the family. Number four, estate planning is not only about heirs. Children are important because they're the terminal beneficiaries of all our effort, all the parents' effort. But if there is anybody who should be protected first and foremost by any planning, it is the wealth builders. Estate planning is as much about protecting the welfare of the parents as it is about ensuring the future of children. You know what that is important? Because many parents think that the best estate plan is to already pass on everything to their children now. What they don't realize is one day they might find themselves with nothing at the point of need when circumstances suddenly change. It bears repeating. If there is anybody who should be protected first and foremost by any planning, it is the parents. Sure, we'll think about the children. We will plan for the children, but never to the detriment of the parents. And finally, estate planning is not only about facing the reality of death. It is about living life to the fullest. To be able to use all the talents that God has given you to produce wealth, to enjoy those wealth, and to be a channel of blessings for those wealth, to live life to the fullest. That's what it's all about. Now, that's the first part of my 4-hour session. We will now skip the next 3 hours and go straight to the last part of the 4-hour session. All right? And go to taxation. It was Benjamin Franklin who once said that in this world nothing is certain but death and taxes.
Yeah.
How true is it? And the truth is there are three things certain: death, taxes, and you know what the other one is? Eternity is certain. Now, whether you'll spend it there or there, that's the subject of another sermon, not this afternoon. Here's the schedule of taxes before trade was enacted. As you can see, the maximum before was 20. All right? And look at the deductions for hospitalization, fuel expenses, standard deduction, family home deduction. This stayed on for about 1997 all the way to 20. That's almost like 20 years. This wasn't changed until it was changed with trade. And the rate now is straight 6%. Standard deduction has been increased from 1 million to 5 million. And the home deduction increased from 1 million to 10 million, effectively shielding the middle class from estate taxation. Because estate tax is never really intended to hit the middle class. That is really intended to target the wealthy, for them to redistribute part of their wealth when they go. All right? Now, whenever you increase the taxes or decrease the taxes, you will necessarily have to look for countermeasures to be able to recover the losses that will result from the lowering of taxes, isn't it? For instance, trade one, they lowered income tax. Result, a lot of revenues will be given up. And so what were the countermeasures enacted by government? Increased excise tax on petroleum products as well as sweetened products. So that's how they do it. Now what about for estate tax? All right, you lowered it to 6%. So how do you recover that? As early as 2016, when this was announced, the Department of Finance actually already announced the countermeasures. And what is that countermeasure? It's really by increasing the value of the real properties. All right? Because today the value of the real properties, the official values at least, are much, much lower compared to the real market values. So the government said, we're going to increase the value, standardize the valuation. As a matter of fact, even before this has been enacted, last year, 2 congressmen and 1 senator actually filed a bill which will be refiled in this Congress, because once a bill is filed and it was not approved or it did not move, you'll have to refile it in the following Congress. And what is that? Part of the comprehensive tax reform program. Actually, there are 4 trains. Train 1, train 2. Train 2 will be the trabajo bill, they call it, for corporate income tax. Train 3 is all about this. Grade 4 is something that will affect our industry. It's rationalizing the taxation of financial products. All right? But let's go first to Train 3. Train 3 was actually filed last year. And what was Train 3 all about? It's really about rationalizing the valuation of real property taxes. Because as I said, the property prices today are much, much lower officially compared to real market values. All right? And even before this was enacted, even before this, I mean, this has not yet been enacted. Some local government units have started increasing the real property values. The real property values are controlled by the local government. That's their source of revenue. The real property taxes, they don't go to BIR, they go to the local government. That's their source of funding. And that's why if they want more funds for the government, what do? You either raise taxes or raise the basis for the taxes. You raise the real property values, correct?
Yes.
And that's what Quezon City did in 2017. It increased the real property values by as much as 500%. Saying that they haven't increased in the last 19 years. Pabawiin nyo naman kami. All right? And if that's not enough, other local government units also follow suit. Cebu also, before that, of course, that didn't sit well with the residents of Quezon City who went to the Supreme Court to question the legality of this order. And the Supreme Court's answer was this: it's valid. In other words, the Supreme Court said that increase was valid, 500% increase. Cebu followed suit with a 300% increase. So what's going to happen? Think about this. Well, you used to have 20% maximum estate tax rate. Impose that on an estate, let's say, worth 100 million before. 20% of 100 million is what? 20 million. Now it's 6%, all right. But it's no longer 100 million. It is now worth 500 million. 6% of 500 million is what? 30 million. They must come up with that. All right? Now, under trade, the filing period has been extended from a mere 6%, 6 months before now it's must be payable in cash. Whether you like it or not, whether you have it or not, it's payable in cash. But now, Trade has provided an installment option up to 2 years. All right? And there is a surcharge of 25% and 50%. 25% regular delays. 50% when there is fraud or an attempted tax evasion. And that's not all.
Interest.
There's another penalty, 20%, which is an annual penalty. Annual. You know what I mean? What is meant by annual? Yearly o taon. Hanggang mabayaran. Alright? It's 20% before. Now, under train, they use the formula instead of fixed percentage. And the formula is double the legal interest for loans and forbearance of money. Today's legal interest is 6%. So double that, 12%. If they change the legal interest to 12%, for example, that means double that would be 24%. But go back to this, 20% annual penalty. Annual means it will continue to increase year after year. And that is why Steve Henares, the former BIR commissioner, was correct when in one press conference she declared that estate tax is like a meter taxi. It accrues from the moment of death. How does a meter taxi work? You enter a taxi, the meter is turned on. The taxi runs, the meter runs. When the taxi is held in traffic, will the meter continue to run? Yes. Minsan, mas mabilis pa nga eh. Kaya ako, grab na. Oh, diba? If you don't settle the estate tax on time, will the penalty meter continue to run? Of course it will. And let me now show you the effect of the penalty meter. Years back, I had a client who came to the office asking for help in the settlement of the estate of the father who died 10 years prior. They did not bother to settle because nobody thought that it was important. They were still able to use the house. But now that they were selling the house, they realized that they couldn't sell without first settling the estate. And so we did a computation. And our computation led us to the figure of about 5 million basic tax, which should have been paid 10 years ago, but they did not. So let's impose the 25% surcharge. That's 120, well, 25% is of 5 million is 1,250,000. So now a total of 650,000. In a taxi meter, that would be our flag down, 6,250,000. Now let's impose the penalty meter. That's 20% of the basic tax of 5 million. That's 1 million every year. So let the meter run. Every year that they had failed to pay the taxes, yes, the penalty had been eating into the estate year after year, after year after year, such that in only 10 years, from a mere 5 million, the estate tax had gone up to 16,250,000. And that's why Kim Hernandez was also correct when in that same press conference she declared that one day nothing could be left in the estate for the heirs. Now here's the good news. Before the elections, and I wonder why it happened just before the elections. Just before the elections, the president signed into law the estate tax amnesty law. And what is the benefit of that? Now listen well, this is where you can really matter a lot to your clients when you give them relevant information such as this. Because I can tell you many of your clients still have many unsettled estates. And this is the time for you to come in and to educate them and let them know. Under the law, without the estate tax amnesty, the law is the tax that would apply is the law at the time that death occurred. If your grandfather, for example, died during the time of Marcos, that would be about 60%. If the grandfather died during the time of Coriatino, that's about 35%. If the parent died during the time of Ramos, that's 20%. And which means that the tax that will be imposed will depend on the law at the time of death of that estate owner. You understand? That's the law. That's why many people, this is apart from the penalties and surcharge. And that's why many people are trapped. Ubus na siguro itong ating property kung mag-declare tayo nito, wala nang naman ito. Bakit? Ang tagal na, 3 generation ang hindi sinesettle eh. Alright, so you can understand how difficult this is, and that's why this is an important law. Now, this is what the estate tax amnesty law did. Under the law, regardless of when death occurred, there is only one tax to be imposed, 6%. With a minimum estate tax payable of 5,000 pesos. And that's not all. Under the tax amnesty law, the surcharge and penalties will all be waived. Now that's huge. That's really huge. And that's why this is the time for you to tell your clients. This is the time to settle all your unsettled estates. And this is the time for them to get a good lawyer. If they don't know one, now they do. Alright? This is really the time to clean up, if you will. Clean up all the sins of the past and settle the tax. Alright? How long is this period? 2 years. It began June 17, 2019. It will end June 16, 2021. Let me tell you this, that's not very much. Can you imagine now? It's almost 2 months after already. Sandali lang yan, ang bilis niya mawala. That's why this is the time to really move and take advantage of this law. Alright? Now, these are the tax settlement options. Let's look at each one of them. I had a classmate, and some of you heard this already before, called me up one day to tell me, I'm sorry to hear condolence. How much money do we need to set aside for the settlement of our estate? So I asked, how much is the estate in the first place? Roughly, about 100 million. So I said that time it was before trade. That's about 20 million in cash. Wala kaming ganyang pera, pare. My mother did not leave cash. She only left us with properties. Doesn't that sound familiar? Asset rich, cash poor. Maraming ganun. Diba? If you die with so much assets without cash, sure, we'll be passing on assets, but you'll also pass on the burden to your children. The burden of producing cash. So my friend said, why don't we? Now, if we use this and the value today, let's just say that the estate is worth 500 million. You impose 6% of 500 million, that is still a significant 6% or 30 million, isn't it? Malaki pa rin yan, masakit pa rin sa bulsa yan. effectively making government as one of your more favored heirs. It would get a good slice of the cake, and hear this, it will also get the juiciest part of the cake, cash. While the heirs will probably end up with the crust of the cake. Why do I say that? Because when you're forced to sell, given a limited period, you usually end up selling at a lower price. And you know what? You usually also end up selling your better properties because they're easier to sell. So here's what can happen. You sell your best property at a loss, you lose more than 30 million, you get the crust of the cake. So my friend said, why don't we borrow money? Sure, if there is anybody willing to lend you money, go ahead. But it'll cost you interest, isn't it? Other additional cost. Now what if the property was donated prior to the death of the mother? Before trade, they would have contented with this donor's tax table. As you can see, the maximum of there is 15%. And the exemption level is 100,000. Any donation within 100,000 within a calendar year is not subject to donor's tax. But this tabular schedule is only applicable when you donate to a relative. You understand? What is a relative? A relative is defined as somebody within the direct line, or in the collateral line up to the 4th degree of consanguinity. That basically means first cousins. They're still considered as relatives. Anybody beyond the first cousin, that is why under the law, by the way, in case you want to know, that's why you cannot marry a first cousin, because he's still a relative, incestual. But you marry a second cousin allowed by law. All right. Now, you donate to a first cousin, you use this table. But you donate to a second cousin, that's not a donation to a relative, that's a donation to a stranger. A corporation, even if it's a family corporation, some of you have heard my talk against corporations as an estate planning tool. Suppose some of them realize that it's not good to incorporate, and so they would like to now remove the property from the corporation by donating it to one of the family members. That donation is not a relative donation. It is a donation from a stranger, because a corporation is not related by blood. And vice versa, you want to donate to the corporation, that's subject to donor's tax for stranger. The donor's tax rate for strangers is not 15%, it's 30%, regardless of the owner. That's why you don't hear of donations to strangers very often. You only hear that when it is being donated to a tax-free institution, like a charitable institution or an educational institution. Ordinarily, nobody donates to a stranger. This is before trade. Look what trade has done. Under trade, the rate has also been lowered to 6%. So there's no more difference, all right? And the following changes. Number one, the exemption has been increased from 100,000 to 250,000. This one is the biggest change, which has a far-reaching consequence. And what is that? There is no more distinction between relatives and strangers. Everything is 6%, and I will tell you of the distinction. I will tell you of the far-reaching implication later. All right. And number three, and I think, as a matter of fact, I really think that Congress made a mistake here, and there is that possibility that they will withdraw this when they realize that mistake. All right. Number three, is again the foolishness of Congress. There are many foolish people in Congress, in case you do not know. There's only one good politician for me as far as I'm concerned. His name is Yorme Isko. Kilala niyo ba si Yorme? Yan ang politician para sa akin. But anyway, sino ba taga-Manila rito? Ayan. Pinsa may mga taga-Cebu direct. Wala? Bismin direct. Ayan. Iloilo. Oh, madali lang magsalita ng Iloilo. Marunong kayo mag-Iloilo? Pa-Ilonggo? Madali lang, di ba? Basta sa Ilonggo, lalagyan nyo lang parati ng ganito. Saan ka pupunta? Labas muna ako. Ilonggo rin. Yan ang equivalent ng taga-Batangas dito. Ayan, yan ang equivalent ng alake. Ako yung taga-Batangas. Alright? So, going back to this. The other one, which is foolish as far as I'm concerned, is in a donation, there is now a doc stance of 1.5%. Now that's crazy. You know what is crazy? Doc stamps is usually imposed on commercial transactions. Like a sale, doc stamps. Is a donation a commercial transaction? No. Now they've imposed this, that's why it doesn't make sense, all right? Like many of them, they don't make sense. All right. Now, so if you donate a property worth 500 million, the tax would be 6%. Pareho rin, ano? 30 million. Walang pagkakaiba na. Pero meron plus 1.5. Significant yung 1.5 na yan. You know why? What's 1.5 of 500 million? That's 7.5 million. Sayang din yun.
Ang daming
Alright? Plus this legal effect. Number one, when you donate, you lose control. Donate mo na eh.
Diba? Saan mo didikit?
And number two, did you know that the donation is considered an advance of inheritance? What does that mean? If I donate to my son a property worth 10 million, in the future, when I go and they make a computation of his share, it says that his share is 12 million. He's not going to be given 12 million. He's only going to be given 2 million. Why? Because of the 10 million donation earlier. That's how the law tries to be fair. A donation is considered an advance of inheritance. All right? Now, what if the property is sold? Would it be cheaper if the property is instead sold to the children? Let's see. First of all, the tax that is to be imposed in a sale will depend on the classification of the property. There are properties classified as capital. There are those that are classified as ordinary, and there are those that are placed inside a corporation, and then the shares of stock are then sold. So let us now look at the tax implications for each of this. First, where a property is classified as capital and it's worth 500 million, you sell that, will be subject to 6% capital gains tax. Pare-pareho na, no? Plus 1.5% documentary tax. All right? But this is only true if the property is classified as capital. Because that same property may have lost its character as a capital asset. It may have already been reclassified as an ordinary asset. And an ordinary asset, when you sell, is not going to be subject to 6%. It's going to be subject to income tax on the gain. Gain means the cost of sale minus the cost of acquisition of that property represents your gain, which will form part of your income during that year. And if you're already at a maximum of 35%, then it's subject to 35%. Can you imagine if the property was acquired in the 80s and you're selling it now? The gain would be huge, isn't it? And that's not enough. Apart from that, there is another tax that is imposed, a 12% VAT. Abay, inubos! Walang patawad. The question is, ladies and gentlemen, and some of you have attended my seminar, you should be confident already to answer this. What is the difference between capital and ordinary assets? Because if you do not know, you might make a mistake. Can you imagine? You have a client, sabi mo sa kliyente mo, alam niyo po, financial executive ako eh, hindi na. FSO na pala ako ngayon. Or manager na ako ngayon. Natutunan po namin na habang bata po kayo, kahit na hard assets po, mas marami sa inyo, maliit lang yung liquid assets nyo. Pero habang tumatanda po tayo, kailangan mas marami na po yung liquid assets natin. Kaysa sa hard assets. Bakit? Pag nagkasakit po kasi tayo pag matanda na, puro hard assets ang hawak natin, ibibenta natin yan, lugi, palugi ang benta niyan. Kaya nga po, habang tumatanda, nag-liquidate po tayo, and we hold more liquid funds. Eh kaya nga po, sir, may suggestion po ako sa inyo. Ibenta po natin yung property mo. Tapos yung proceeds, ilagay po natin sa aksa. Diba? Diba? Na sales stock eh, di ba? Eh so, pumayag ko nga, maganda yan. Magkano ba rin? Maganda pala yun. Sige nga, tulungan mo nga ako ibenta. Binenta na yun. Now, he's thinking that he would only pay 6%. But because you and the client do not know the difference between capital and ordinary, biglang bumalik si BIR. Sabi, it's not 6%. That's income tax. That's fact. Magtago ka na. That can happen. And it has happened. Again, the question is, what is the difference between capital and ordinary? The difference, according to BIR ruling, lies in the use of the property. Where a property is used for trade or business, held for lease or for sale, such as when one is a real estate dealer or broker or developer. Sell those properties, it'll be subject to income tax. But when a property is not used for trade or business, it doesn't generate any income, no revenue. It's your residence, idle properties, residential, vacation houses that you use every so often. Sell those properties, it'll be subject to 6%. But the difference is, one is used for trade or business, the other is not. One generates income, the other does not. Now, it doesn't mean though, that if you have a residential property, it'll always be capital. No, because once that residential property is rented out, it loses its character as a capital asset. It becomes an ordinary asset. But no issue, you're not going to sell it. But what if you're now selling it? You need the money. And now it has become an ordinary asset. Or you may have commercial properties that you'd like to already transfer to your children, but you cannot because it's commercial. That means it's ordinary asset. Here's where the mistake of train comes in. Don't sell it. Donate it. Donation is how much? 6%. In a donation, there is no distinction between capital and ordinary. It's 6% regardless. And that's where the mistake is that I'm saying. That is where the
donate mo na sa akin na nito.
They come in.
Wala nang stranger.
Wala na stranger eh.
The distinction between donation of capital and donation
Sa mong bahay, bro.
of ordinary.
Ako na lang magbayad doon sa 6% at 1.5.
Now, the third one, where you now create a corporation and then you place the titles of the residences in the corporation and then sell the shares of stocks to the children, for which a net capital gains tax of 15% shall be imposed. But this tax, 15%, is a significant increase from the previous before train. Before train, it was 5 to 10%. Under train, it's a straight 15%. This tax is imposed on the net gain. You understand? Not on the value of the transaction, but on the net gain only. For example, if you have shares of stocks that you acquired for 10 million, you're now selling for 12 million, on what tax will this tax be imposed? How much? 2 million, the net gain. Now what if I sell the shares of stocks for 10 million? How much will the tax be? Zero. Why? 15% of zero is zero. And therein lies the secret of corporations. How corporations can actually shield against taxes, and this has been used extensively in estate planning by lawyers. Let me illustrate. Years back, I had a client who incorporated his residential property in Las Marinas Village. Back in the early 80s, many of you were not yet born. The value of property there was about 1 million. You put a 1 million property into a corporation, the book value of this corporation would be 1 million, correct? Because that's the capital that you put in. Now, through the years, the book value remained at 1 million. Even up to today, if you look at the books, you will see that the corporation still has a 1 million book value, notwithstanding the appreciation of the asset that it is holding. There is no regulation that requires you to adjust your book value every time there is an adjustment in the value of the assets. There's none. You can volunteer to do that, but you'll pay taxes. That's why nobody does that. Now here's the thing. Today the value of this asset is a whopping 750 million. That's 2,500 square meters at 300,000 per square meter. That's the last sale in Las Marinas Village. So now you have a 750 million in a corporation worth 1 million. The last step in this estate plan is this. Now that I'm old and gray, I am ready to transfer the shares of stock to my children. I will sell the shares of stock for how much?
Discounted.
1 million. How much would the tax be? There you go. That's where the strength of corporation lies. And this is why this was extensively used as a tax shield. It was perfect until Kim Henares came along. And she issued Revenue Regulation 6-2013, which changed the rule. Now the rule is this. Whenever you dispose of shares of stocks, either by donation, by inheritance, or by sale, the valuation of the shares will be adjusted according to the value of the assets that it is holding, the current value. And that completely destroyed the luster of corporations as a legitimate tax avoidance tool. Come now, Commissioner Dulay, who issued Revenue Regulation 12-2018 and 17-2018. In said regulation, he upheld the issuance of Kim Henares, saying that it will be based on the adjusted value, except when the transfer is by donation or by inheritance. In other words, if the transfer of the sale would be by means of inheritance or by donation, the valuation of the shares would be the book value. But if the transfer is by means of a sale, then the valuation of the shares will be based on the asset value. So that restored some of the advantages as a tax shield of corporations. Understand? But that doesn't make corporations as an ideal estate planning tool. For those of you who attended my seminar, you know that I am against corporations because it results in co-ownership among the heirs. And in a co-ownership, that's where you usually have conflicts among family members. All right? Effects of the sale, loss of control. And you will recall, if you recall your seminar years back, that when you sell to a child who is married, that property that you sold to your child will become community or conjugal, co-owned with the spouse. If it is sold, all right? Unlike in a donation or a sale, if you a donation or inheritance, when a property is received by way of donation or by way of inheritance, the property would be exclusive to the donee or to the heir. So if the intention of the family is to keep the property within the family bloodline, the ownership within the family bloodline, you don't go for sale. You go for a donation or inheritance, all right? As I said, the problem with the sale, and when you actually transfer an asset to a corporation, there's a virtual sale, which will result in co-ownership. And the possibility of a simulated sale. What is a simulated sale? A fictitious sale. Why is it considered fictitious? No money involved. It happens in families. Dito sale na. Kunwari binenta, wala namang bayad sa akin. If nobody complains, no issue. But let me ask you a question. Who might complain in a simulated sale?
Kapatid.
Other heirs whose rights are being affected. Akala mo pinapasa na lahat kay Junior? Kami wala na. Di ba? Let me give you an example. A husband and wife had 2 daughters. And one niece who grew up with them was treated like another daughter without being adopted. She was given good education, med school as a matter of fact, and became a doctor, married another doctor, and then left home to practice in the province. After a while, the doctor and the doctor came, talked to the uncle, whom she addresses that. Kasi nasa lumaki tayo, kailangan po namin ng tulong. Yung tulong iha.